Hey y'all, so welcome to my channel, and I hope that you're ready because this video for the next part of the Write With Me series is, well, it's one of my favorite parts of my writing process, and it's called the brain dump. So I'm making this video really quick just to show this part of the process. This is something, it's a very disorganized part of my writing process, but it's also very important. And I don't know if, I've never seen this as like described as a technique in any like author, like plotting outline that I've seen, but it's just something that works really well for me. So to go into this process, I just want to, first of all, let you know that this part of writing it can be kind of messy and raw, but it's also creative. So if any of you are like really stuck on structure, yeah, that would come after this process. And I'm actually usually very structured with certain things, but the purpose of this part is to just get everything out of your head and you'll organize it all later. So you just have to let go of the thought of like everything has to be linear and in order and line up perfectly, and just let the creative process take control. So let's get started with it. Usually what happens for me is like I'll start with a story, I'll start with a general idea of where I'm going, and like we said before, I'll kind of outline some general things about characters, and then my thought process is I'll go like, down the line and just go from characters to friends to minor characters, things like that. And then you go into like the plot and all of that next. But that never happens for me because once I get an idea of a story and a loose thought of like the characters, this thing happens where I get random bursts of inspiration just as I'm living regular life. So I might just be driving and I'll see like a clip of a scene visually, and I'll just jot that down really quick. And so this part of my process, I lean so heavily on my notes app and my phone, because no matter if I'm sitting in the doctor's office or walking or exercising or whatever, if something pops up, then I just jot it down really quick. And it's not really in any kind of like neat fashion. Like it'll be a jumble of dialogue mixed with description, mixed with this is just how the scene will go. Sometimes I actually write a loose, very basic outline of the scene. So however it's showing up in my mind is how I write it down. And then later on, I pull those pieces and try to organize it when I get to like actually organizing chapters. But this part is just about throwing in whatever pops up in my head about the characters in the book that I'll be writing. So I had a lot of brain dumps this week in regards to Neveah's character, her personality, but also like her family life, the brain dumps kind of helped me fill in like the rest of the story, like any gaps that I may have not had a chance to visit yet. And for this part, I used my iPad. I use this, ooh, it's smudgy, but I use this app called Neveah on my iPad where you can like, you can get your pen and, hold on, and you can like write, whatever. And the great part about this app is like it turns your writing into text. So you can write it with your handwriting, you hit a button, now it's text, you can draft it as a document and upload it into Word or whatever, which is awesome. I also use Neveah a lot if I'm having like writer's block, because sometimes if I've been like typing on my like laptop a lot or like my computer, I'll have like writer's block, and there's something about like grabbing my iPad and like writing as if I'm writing in a journal that just brings back that creative spark. So this is something I tell a lot of authors to use if you're having like an issue with kind of like getting inspired creatively. It's something about like going back to that, just I don't know, like that old school method of just actually writing versus typing that kind of gets things working again for me. But yeah, so like normally I'll just like write like the character's name. So I'll write like Neveah on here. And yeah, that's my handwriting. Don't judge. But from there, I'll just brain dump everything that I've been thinking about. And lately, I was listening to this podcast, and this person was talking about how a lot of your trauma comes from your childhood. And for some reason, that kind of stuck with me personally, because I was like, I don't feel like my trauma came from my childhood. Not my trauma in relationships. I feel like my trauma in relationships came after childhood, because the things that I had to like heal weren't a product of my childhood. So let me dive into that, because it was an interesting journey for me going through therapy until I got to that moment where I was like, I don't think this applies. So I do want to caveat it by saying that, yeah, some things do start in childhood. That is true. However, I'm speaking about like major things that I've had to unravel. So I'll give you an example. So with my childhood, you know, I lived in a home with family. We were all different. We all accepted each other's differences. There was no like, there was no instances of loud arguments. When we disagreed, we sat down, we spoke about it. We, you know, I mean, there was, everybody had their own space. I mean, I didn't grow up where we lived in this huge home. We occupied a small amount of space, so we all learned how to get along and accept each other. Even though we had differences, we kind of allowed each other this space to be individuals. As far as my creative passions as a child, like we didn't really watch a lot of television. I grew up with a religious background, so there was structure, and there was definitely like, you know, right and wrong ways of acting, I guess, but it was mostly as far as like rules and that kind of thing. But we were allowed to express ourselves. Like if we didn't agree with a rule or something, I was allowed to speak about that and you know, say whatever. And then I was raised by my grandmother and my aunt, so they would just be like, okay, well, we hear you, but this is the reason why this rule is this way. And so there was that kind of thing where things were explained to me, and then I was able to still be myself. And yeah, I mean, there was no like all of the things that people kind of talk about in therapy, where they're like, you know, there's these wounds and all this stuff that comes from narcissistic parents and all. I didn't really have that. Like it was a foundation of like forgiveness and understanding and acceptance, and knowing that even though people are different, the intention behind how things are happening is there's a good intention. Everything's based off of love, because we're family, we love each other, and we aren't perfect. We may hurt each other sometimes, but you know, it's not intentional, and we'll do what needs to be done to make it right. So then for me, growing up like that and then going into romantic relationships, I think that a lot of people that I ended up being in a relationship with didn't have that kind of foundation. So when I was going into relationships, my thought is like, oh, I can just be free to be myself, and if there's issues, we can just talk about them and we'll come to a resolution, and we just will let each other be individuals, and we'll, you know, we'll compromise in a way that I'm looking for the best for them, they're looking for the best for me, and it'll be a happy thing. And I think what I discovered is, like I said, a lot of people didn't have that foundation growing up. They might have had a foundation of control where they grew up feeling like they had a parent that was like, it's either my way or the highway, and this is my house, and you're going to do this and this, and I don't care if there's no explanation of things. And maybe they were raised to have to like change themselves or mold themselves in a way to be accepted and deserving of love. And so they brought that to the relationship. And yeah, in a lot of instances, I was like, what the heck? Like, I didn't understand. And so, that led to a lot of different damage in my journey, because I had to understand how to like protect myself in a way where, because I grew up thinking like that, or having that kind of understanding as something inherent. Like when someone says they love you and they care about you, then they wish the best for you. And then I had to learn that sometimes that's not exactly true. Like some people love you because they love how you make them feel, and it's not so much the best for you, but it's them and all of that stuff. So yeah, so that was interesting for me going through therapy, where therapists normally try to walk things back and give, use a general framework to like fit everyone's lives. And I just don't think that always works when it comes to Black women, especially because most of us come from a family of like, families built on communal healing, not so much clinical diagnosis. A lot of us come from families that didn't go to the doctor and get treated for certain things. So we kind of learned how to like work around each other and accept each other and just be like, oh, that's such and such, don't mind them, they don't mean no harm, and just accept people for who they are. So then it wasn't until after we left home and dove into like the world of relationships that we came to terms with, wait a minute, like, people operate a little bit different here, and I need to like figure out how to level the playing field now that I'm in a world that doesn't operate like how my home life did. And so, it's interesting coming from a culture or a family background where everything is, there's not really like labeling and medication to get along. Everything is resolved over a plate of food and a nice long talk and hugs and giving you some space to breathe and let out your feelings, and then diving into a world where people are a little bit more like, if you don't act like this, this, and this, I'm cutting you off, and I gotta protect my peace, and like all of this stuff. And so when I was brain dumping, that kind of came to mind, and I was like, I want to give that to Neveah to kind of explore in writing because in my other books I did do a lot of the like, let me go to childhood and place something there that would be a reason why they act a certain way when they get older. And so in this one, I wanted to give Neveah that aspect where she kind of had a decent, like, it wasn't perfect, but it was a decently like healthy childhood, and then all of her stuff happened after. So then I started thinking about like, well, what does that look like? So I, when I'm brain dumping, I don't really follow a structure. I just go along the line. So for me, I was like, okay, so does she have parents? I wanted in this book for her to have a really close relationship with her mother, but I wanted it to like, for some reason I was like, no, I want it so that like her mother just passed away. So she's in that spot where she's still kind of grieving this mother that was like her best friend. In my books, in the past ones, I've done a lot of like daddy's girl things, mainly because, like I've written books to try to explore certain dynamics that I may not have personally been able to explore. And I have several mother figures in my life. My father died when I was young, so I didn't really have that experience. So I've had I've lived a lot of that experience through my characters. But this one, I was like, I want to actually outline that that strong mother bond that I got to experience. Yeah, I wanted to give her like this, like nurturing energy. I think I'm like doing it live. So you guys are seeing how the brain dump goes in live fashion because I'm writing this down. But yeah, I think I want to have it for purposes of where I think I want to go with this story. I don't want her to have a father. I don't want her to know anything about her father. I want it so that her mother just doesn't, that's just something she just doesn't discuss at all with her. So a big question mark on the father thing. Siblings, I don't see her having any siblings. I thought about that, but you know, it's almost like when you think about siblings, you think about like what would that dynamic look like? Do I want her to be the oldest child? 'Cause there's a dynamic that comes with that, or the youngest, or there's other things you have to kind of like think about when you're giving a character siblings. You have to think about what is their relationship with their sibling, how did they grow up. Like there's all this other stuff that comes into play, and I don't think I want to dive into that because I'm giving Neveah children, and I think that's complex enough because adding children into a story is already complex. So at least for book one, you can always, as an author, like have like book 5, some long lost sister or something, but at least for book 1, I don't want to introduce any siblings. So like I said, children, I'm giving her 2. I came up with the names for the sons. She has 2 boys. Samson and Samuel are their names. Samson is 7. Samuel is, I'm going to make him 10 because I want them to be kind of close in age. And then, let's see. So then obviously if she has children, there's a father involved. I don't have a name yet for the father, so I'm just going to put a question mark there. But I do have that. I do think I want him to be in a relationship and have twins. So they have Samson and Samuel together, and then I'm going to put that he has 2 twins. I guess like a boy and a girl. I think that would be cool. Boy and girl. And so, you see how messy that is? Yeah, my handwriting, like I don't even worry about it looking cute, so I didn't even want to turn that to the screen, but y'all saw a secret of mine. Like it looks a mess. Just wait till I start drawing the arrows. So the ex, married, 2 children, twins, I said. So I have to write this over because I used the wrong, Nebo has like different options, and if you have to use like the notebook one to be able to like tap like this and it turns it into text. So I had to rewrite it. But anyways, okay, so, and then also it has spell check like once it turns into text. So it's kind of awesome. If you are like me and sometimes you need to like write, it's a really good app to use. But and it's Nebo. Okay. All right. So what else with her? So if she doesn't have siblings, I feel like I have to give her really good friend relationships because I don't want her to be like she's on an island. So let's say friends. So I think I'm gonna give her, let's say, I feel like I should give her, like the number that popped up in my head was 3 friends. That seems a lot to me because then you have to write about the relationships that she has with these 3 friends. So, and then you have to kind of develop them a little bit. So I don't know. I want to say no to that, but I'm going to keep it because for some reason, like when I'm brain dumping, I just write what pops up, and that's what kept popping up was three friends. So I'll figure that out later. 3 friends. I don't know if I'm going to make any of them a guy. I think they're all going to be women because I want her to have a really good, like, friendship, almost like a best friend friendship with her ex. That kind of came about from them, like, I guess, co-parenting after not being together. So I'll give her 3 friends. They're women. And let's see. Yeah. Oh, her job. So I think I want her to work at like I want her to be huge with like women rights. Like that's her thing. It's like um, doing something with women that have had some kind of trauma or something. They're healing from some kind of trauma, because I think that's how I want to bring in like that whole therapy thing into the book, where it's like where she's like, you know, my stuff didn't happen as a child. It happened much later. So I think I want her to work at like a mental health facility for women who are there because of different trauma that they've had in their life. So like a trauma facility. Yeah, so like a trauma, so, you know, women that had to deal with like abuse of all kinds, or um, anything like that that is traumatic, even maybe substance abuse or something. I don't know if I want to do substance abuse, so let me actually take that off. I think that's another dive into something else. I'm just gonna keep it with like relationship sort of trauma, like whether that's family, friends, romantic. I'm just gonna leave it with that. So yeah, I think that would be a great place for her to work, based off the fact that I already did the meet cute where she's at a protest, so she has to be very passionate about this. She's at a protest concerning, um, you know, women having the rights to their bodies. So that also gives a lot of insight about her personality. Um, when I think about where she lives, of course, I'm creating like another world for this book, but I would say that she lives in like kind of like inner city, but you know, she's like maybe upper middle class, um, like a nice, if I'm thinking about Atlanta, like she would probably live in like a Buckhead or Brookhaven place, like neighborhood, if I'm thinking about the city I live in, Atlanta. So that would be like her neighborhood, or even like a North Druid Hills maybe. So and I guess hobbies, she does Pilates, because I love Pilates, so I have to have that in there. Do I see her as a yoga girly? Maybe. I don't know. I'll put a question mark with that. I don't know if I see her as that. I might see her like, do I see her? I don't know if I see her doing yoga. I think she would be like, maybe like boxing, or like maybe some martial arts, something. Yeah, maybe that. She can't cook. She can't cook. I'm just gonna put that in there. That's going to be a fault of hers. One big thing I go through with my character is their shadows. So if you've never heard of what a shadow is I think the term came from Carl Jung. I'm a psych major, so I like to pull that stuff into my books. But basically, your shadow is the parts of yourself that you like to ignore and act like aren't there, because it's like not the greatest aspects to want to claim. Like maybe you're selfish, maybe you are stingy, I don't know, like those things. But everybody has them. So it's one of those things where it's like, just own it, try to figure out how to just do no harm, and, you know, operate in awareness with it. But it's a process to that, because most people are in denial of their shadow at first. They're like, oh, I'm not egotistical. And it's like, okay. You know, people that are like arrogant or whatever, like most people are in denial of it. And then when they do come to terms with it, usually that's a process where it's like, oh, I suck, I'm horrible, I've been, you know, you revisit all the times that you like inadvertently hurt someone in your ignorance. And then after that, you come to terms with like, hey, I'm gonna make peace with this, right? So with my characters, I think about what their shadows are and then where are they in the process? Are they in the process where they've made peace with it? Are they unaware? Like, where are they? Just know if your character is unaware of their shadow, then you have to go through the process of them having the ego death and rectifying it before you can get to the point where they are like evolved. So just know that that will affect your story. And I've done that a few times with the guys in my books. I've had them unaware and then they have to go through it once they come into contact with the woman that they fall in love with. So that's something else I explore in my brain dumps. So for Neveah, I think for her shadow, I'm going to give her a strong sense of justice, which might make her a little bit judgmental. Maybe a little bit closed-minded, you know, like unable to see things from different angles initially. What else do I think I want to give her? I keep thinking like what is popping up in my head is like she's a little selfish. I didn't want to write that down because I'm like, because whatever you make as the shadow, like you have to write it into the story. And I was like, I didn't want the challenge of making a selfish person seem likable because she has to be likable. So that means I have to write that in a way where it's like, okay, so I'll think about that later. But I wrote it down, so that's one of her things. I feel like it's supposed to be there. Yeah, so I mean, if she has a strong sense of judgment, I feel like that makes her a little bit of a know-it-all, very outspoken, which isn't too bad, you know, very outspoken, maybe blunt, tell it like it is her personality. She's, you know, strong, I guess, you know. But then the thing with that is, I wonder if that makes her have an inability to be vulnerable. Like, because I just feel like somebody that operates with a strong sense of judgment is probably judgmental about themselves and probably is not as forthcoming about their shortcomings to other people. So maybe an inability to be vulnerable. And that would create a huge issue with her and any love interest. So I think I'm gonna have that be the thing that she has to work through, is being vulnerable. I actually think it makes sense that that's the issue she'll have to work through based off of what I said earlier. If she has had trauma in relationships where it comes to like being accepted for who she is, like if she came from a background where her mother just accepted her and loved her unconditionally, and then she entered into relationships where people put conditions on her for her to have to earn love, then I can see why she would have built an inability to be vulnerable because of the fear of not being accepted once someone sees, you know, the not so great sides of her, especially if she's had relationships where when those things came out, they ended. So yeah, so I think that works. I think I'm good with the shadows. So then from shadows, I go to like strengths. I said some of her strengths already, so I don't have to revisit that as much. But yeah, I think for the most part, I think I've given you guys a good idea of like what it is to like do a brain dump. And I've done a good amount of the brain dump with you already, like all down here. So, but yeah, so the next thing that you do after you do like the character brain dumps is just go into the book and do, and I'm not going to do that live because I want you guys to be surprised when you read the book, but go into the book and do a plot brain dump and just dump whatever it is. And I even dump like if there's something funny I saw or heard someone say or whatever, like I'll put like a joke or whatever in there because it's like, oh, okay, I want to refer to this joke in the book. Put all of that down there, and then later when you're starting to structure your chapters, then in a linear way, use your plot blank brain dump to structure everything in order, and then fill it in with the details from your character brain dumps. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I work with that. And once you finish that, it becomes so easy to actually do the writing part of it, because you'll have pieces already written, you'll have everything outlined. I mean, you're really just filling it in and connecting the dots to do your rough draft. And then obviously you go through, or at least I go through, levels and levels and levels and levels of revision after the rough draft is done. But the hardest part to me is really the rough draft, getting that done. That's the foundation, that's the skeleton of it, and then everything else is just filling in the meat. So it's not too bad. So if I had to give you tips on how to do this process in the best way, I would say, like, the tip number one, make sure that you have, you let your characters have a shadow. So I already spoke about that, but that's so important because that's where the story lives. That's how you like expand on it. You kind of give a humanity to your character by doing that. So usually, like you saw with my brain dump, I pick whatever first comes to my mind, and for some reason it all ends up fitting. So that's why I usually don't fight it, even though I'm like, I don't want to like put it in there, especially if it's difficult, because it just gives balance to your story. You can start with your own patterns also when you're thinking about your story. Like I said, with her, the whole therapy thing and her upbringing, I would say start with certain things that you have experience with, or in some cases that you don't have experience with and you're trying to figure out, and then create a storyline around that and just dump whatever it is that comes to mind and use that to fill in your story. Also, the next tip is you want to ask yourself, what is the lie that they tell themselves? Like, what is the lie that my character tells herself that stops her from moving forward? And so for Neveah, because of this whole thing of like her afraid to be vulnerable and afraid to be herself and afraid of not, having experience where she wasn't accepted, the lie that she tells herself is, I can only be fully myself when I'm alone. So that makes her put everybody in her relationship or in her love relationships at a distance, which will create an issue with the character that with the person that is her love interest in this book, because for reasons that I'm not going to share right now, he's unable to let her go. Not that he doesn't want to let her go, but it's almost a matter of destiny that he's supposed to be with her. So the distance that she keeps creating is consistently getting in the way, and he's bound in a way to like fight through that wall. So there's that dynamic that builds from that. And the final tip I want to give you when you're doing your brain dumping process with your characters, and with your plot, definitely, is, let the romance be redemptive, not earned. That's a big thing for me. Like, when it's just like, like chapter 1, paragraph 5, and the people are just in love, and it's just like, where's the challenge here? Like, it happens, and sometimes people are in the mood for that kind of romance. I just don't write stories like that. I don't like to just give my characters a man. I like to give them a partner who makes them feel safe, a partner that challenges the ideas that they've had about love and about themselves and about others, like a partner that seems to be the right one that they needed in order to get to the next better version of themselves. So not someone that's easy, not someone that's hard. Like, you can have like a love that's easy in the way that, like, you can have a healthy hard love, if that makes sense. Like, it's not hard because it's like this person's beating me upside my head and cussing me out, and no, we don't do that. but it's hard in the sense of like you have to do the thing that you've been resisting to do. Like you have to grow up, you have to rise, you have to be a better version of yourself, you have to step outside of your comfort zone in order to get the fullness of it. So, but the person is still healthy and respectful and loving, but they are challenging to you, and it's a challenge you need because pressure makes diamonds. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed joining me on my process of my first few brain dumps for this book. Yeah, I mean it's to me it's a really fun process. It's like getting everything that's been in your head out and then getting it ready to organize. And as I grow as a writer and also as I grow as a woman, I realized that writing isn't just building worlds, it's also like excavating your own world and kind of digging through some things that you might have gone through or you might have experienced or even that you want to experience. When we started this in my very first video, I said that the character that you're creating for this one needs to be the healed version of yourself. So the part of you that has moved into a space where you're not making decisions and choices based off of fear, but out of your growth and that process isn't healing process isn't always complete. So I think even with writing in that way, you'll still discover some things about yourself, and that's what the purpose of this is, right? And also seeing like what kind of person do you have to be, and what kind of person what kind of way would you need to think, in what way would you need to think in order to live the life and that you want to live and attract the person you want to be with. Like, what does that look like? Putting it on paper helps you be able to see that. So if you want to continue writing with me, if this hits something for you, make sure that you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and we can keep writing together. And always feel free to drop a comment. If you've ever had a therapist try to define you with a template that did not match, or even if you ever dated someone that made you feel like being soft was just too much. All right, until next time, bye. You do not want to miss the next video, I promise. So please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more.